Hey, hi, how are you? My name's Falter. Welcome back to another tier list video. Listen, don't judge me. In an effort to be putting out a video every day in June, I decided to do a few more videos that I could just sit down and record in like 15-20 minutes and get them out there into the world. This is the type of content I do want to make, however I will say it is a little less investment based than the normal content I do produce. However, this is still a video I want to make. And unlike the other one, it is not just a raw tier list. It is in fact a which job should you start with styled tier list. And what do I mean by that? I mean S tier will be jobs that if you start the game, or this is your first job that you really invest time into, it won't be too hard to pick everything up and learn the job well. And D tiers are, this should probably not be your first job. I highly recommend it being a job that you pick up and try and learn after you figured out the core mechanics of the game. And it's a job that also requires a bit more investment into learning its rotation and ins and outs. So let's start with essentially setting up the boundaries, right? Like, what is a job I consider S tier, starting with this is the easiest thing in the world? What's a job I consider D tier? You probably shouldn't start with this, it should probably be a later thing. Alright, S tier, a job that's easy to start with is actually Paladin. It is, if you want to start with a tank, it is the tank's tank. It is the most basic of tanks that there is. Its rotation is very, very straightforward throughout the entire beginning of the game, and by the time you reach Stormblood and you get your magic phase, you'll probably know enough about the game that transitioning into a magic phase isn't really that big of a deal, and you can just kind of naturally go, oh, well, Fight or Flight ran out, I guess I should use Requiescat and hit all these crazy spells I got, right? That's kind of where my mentality is for it. It does have a bit more ins and outs, and I'm tempted to put it in A tier. However, in terms of just starting at level 1, all the way up to like level 60, the job is very straightforward and very easy to get a handle on, and I think even the players who know the least about this game could very easily figure out how to play it. Now, a job that I consider very hard to pick up and learn the ins and outs, a job that you probably shouldn't start with, is Black Mage. Black Mage is really complicated once you unlock stuff like Fire 4. Its rotation is not very easy to get a handle on. And combine that with the fact that it has a very, very punishing way of making you deal less damage when you do things incorrectly by making you drop a Nokian, or just making you drop out of Astral Fire or Rumble Ice. The job is just not really something that I can recommend to any new player. It has so many changes through the way that you have to play it as you level, it's just a lot to handle. And so, even if I would rate it pretty decently in terms of a job that I enjoy playing, I can't say this is something I would ever recommend to a new player to start up on. Now that I kind of set the boundaries on what I consider to be an easier job to start as, and a harder job to start as, or a job I recommend you start as versus a job I don't recommend you start as, essentially, let's go back through by roles the same way I did in the previous video. So Gunbreaker, solid D tier. Please don't start with this tank. It is a lot more complex rotationally than the other tanks are. It has a lot more gauge management than the other tanks do, especially at level 90. At level 90, if you manage your gauges wrong or let your skills drift, the effectiveness of you and a party significantly drops. It requires constant double weaving. It requires you to really pre-plan your mitigations. Its invuln is by far one of the worst out of the bunch right now. I mean, it's powerful, don't get me wrong, but like, Hollowed Ground, Living Dead, Holmgang are all better than Super Polite at this point. It's just factual. It's not me hating on Super Polite. I think Super Polite's amazing. It's just the other ones are better. It's just not something I can easily recommend as your first tank. I think it's a great tank once you've learned the ins and outs of tanking. I think it's a great challenge to try and learn how to really manage your gauges, but it's definitely down there with Black Mage as a pick this job up after you've learned the game a bit. Warrior, S tier. Baby's first tank, highly recommended. By the time when you hit level 54 and unlock Raw Intuition, you now no longer need a healer. Its rotation is straightforward and pretty brain dead. Even when you get to level 90, it's probably one of the simplest tanks to work around. All you really have to manage is your beast gauge and your dashes. Like, highly, highly recommended. And in fact, I'm going to shove it up at the very far left here, implying that this is like the #1 tank I would ever recommend to you starting as. And I'm shoving Black Mage down here to the bottom right as, please never start on Black Mage if you're new to MMOs or new to 14. Dark Knight. Solid B. I don't think it's a terrible tank to start as, but I don't think that it's very intuitive. I think it's very busy in the way the Gunbreaker is, but it is much more forgiving of you messing up your rotation because it is typically just mana management and cooldown management, much less so than gauge management. Like if you it's hard to mess up the gauge generation on Dark Knight unless you drop Blood Weapon GCDs, which is now much easier since they changed the way it works. So while I don't think I can put it in S tier because of some of the oddness of the job, especially with how much more difficult it is to learn mitigations on because of the way Dark Mind works, for example, and learning to time TBN and when to use it to get most value. It's kind of teetering on being A tier for me. The way that they changed Stalwart Soul to now unlock at 40 is really nice. The way the Blood Weapon is now no longer timer based is really nice. But I think it has just like a few too many ins and outs for me to say this can be baby's first tank. I'd say if you want a tank, play Warrior or Paladin first, and it'll eventually come back down to Dark Knight later on. Let's go into healers. White Mage. Surprise, surprise, it's actually going in A tier. While it is baby's first healer, because it's the only one that starts at level 1, it's not... It's probably going to be the highest ranked out of all the healers, but it's not as intuitive or simple as the other tanks are, right? Like Warrior and Paladin, I think anyone could pick those up in seconds and be like, oh, this is how the job works, got it. White Mage's healing is a little weird. It's very GCD dependent until level probably 70. And even then it's still pretty GCD dependent. And with the way that it encourages people to spam Cure 1 with free Cure procs, just use Cure 2, please, it's better. Cure 2 is just better. Please, just use Cure 2. I have PTSD about this at this point. It's probably the #1 healer I recommend picking up, but I just don't find it to be as simple as like the way that the tanks are. Especially because of Holy. A lot of people don't realize how powerful Holy is, and while, yeah, you should use it, it's your AoE button. I don't know, it's the healer I most recommend you pick up early, but I just can't put it in the same tier as Warrior and Paladin, which feels so much better to start as. Astro, solid C tier. Astro has a lot of learning to do about it. It is, you know what? No, I take it back. Solid D tier. Astro's way down here at the bottom. The more I think about it, the more I realize having to play all your cards, having to deal with your Arcanas, having so many OGCD heals, it's just a lot. It is just a lot, and I cannot recommend it for new healers at all. It's something you should do after you have a basic handle on healing. It is just quite a mess of a job. It has the problem that Sage has when it comes to being a job for a new healer, and that it has so many tools and options that are very powerful and combined in very good ways. But if you don't know the basics of how to use those tools, it will not work very well. Speaking of Sage, C tier. I think Sage is amazing. I really do think it's one of the best healers in the game right now, and it's probably my personal favorite at this point in time. But man, please do not pick it up as your first healer. Please grab White Mage or Scholar first. They're just going to help you much, much more along your way than picking up Sage as your first healer. Definitely more than picking up It's definitely better than picking up Astro IMO. I think Astro is just way too busy. Astro's maybe has a case for being like easier to pick up than Sage, but like at least Sage pushes the idea of put a thing on your tank, damage stuff in the meantime to heal them. I really like that it has that as a mechanic. It doesn't push every healer to DPS as much as they probably should be, unfortunately. But it's still very good. We're gonna talk about Scholar now. Throw it in B tier with Dark Knight. It kind of has the same ins and outs that I have, and the same problems that I have with Dark Knight, in that it's very good. It's not super unintuitive, but it's not super intuitive. It has a lot of crazy ins and outs with the fairy. Once you unlock recitation, the job gets much more complex as well. Fairy can like solo heal your way through a lot of early game dungeons, so can Whispering Dawn. Knowing when to add low versus when to stop spamming add low is a whole thing. Unfortunately, you don't really get a pure heal until the 50s, with either emergency tactics or just being able to use indomitability. So you're stuck spamming shields on people with Sucker to heal for a while there, which kind of builds bad habits. So I can't really push it much higher than B tier IMO. I still recommend Scholar over Sage over Astro. This is just how, if you're going to pick up a healer, White Mage would be the best one by far. Scholar is fine. Probably shouldn't do Sage. Please don't do Astro. That is just my general opinion on the matter. Like I said, this is a which job should you pick up first tier list. Same structure as my last tier list. Far left is pick this up first. At the top, bottom right is please pick this up after you have a bit better handle on the game and are okay with doing research on how the job works. Alright, well, since we already started a little bit onto casters, let's go into casters. Red Mage, solid A tier. Kinda sitting in the same boat as White Mage. It's pretty solid baby's first caster. I cannot wholeheartedly put it in S tier, despite the fact that it is not that complex. It also starts at level 50 with a brand new style of gameplay with dual cast, making it difficult for me to say, hey, the job is brain dead, you can make sense of it immediately. Dual cast can throw people for a loop. The way that you have to generate mana throws people for a loop, and the fact that you get the whole base kit at 50 in place of gradually building over time can really throw some people. So it is really it is really basic. It is really intrinsic. Build white black mana, cast melee. Build white black mana, cast melee. You know, but it's not quite as simple as the next job in the list, Summoner. You're literally playing with Legos right now. It's always been probably one of my recommended, if you want to play as a caster, just start a Summoner. Or Arcanist, I suppose, goes into Summoner. So, especially nowadays, because of the way that it works, it is very, very much a... It builds upon itself. I did look into how it works as a leveling process now. It builds upon itself much better than it used to. And that you unlock certain Eggies at a time, or Eggy summons at a time. You get Ifrit Titan Garuda, not in that order, but you get Ifrit Titan Garuda and you slowly unlock them, as well as getting the more powerful baby version of your Bahamut phase early on. You get the more powerful version of Bahamut later, then you get True Bahamut, then it builds into Phoenix, then you get your upgraded Demi summons. It builds very well on itself, it's pretty self-explanatory. It has the thing that a lot of melees have, where you just kind of push your glowy buttons. And when you don't, you can just kind of spam Ruin, which is really nice, so to speak. It's probably the best caster to start as right now. Because of the simplicity in its rotation, it'll really get you into the idea of casting. It also has a lot more instant casts than a lot of the other casters do. So, while it's not the best in terms of getting used to the idea of buckling down and learning when to hard cast versus when to try and use an instant cast, it has a lot of instant casts to make it easier to get into that mentality of I have to stand still sometimes, but there are times when I can plan around movement. So, you know, it's S tier because it's pretty simple to start, and it's at level 1 and you can level it the whole way. Alright, is ranged. Bard is going into B tier, because, while Bard is pretty straightforward and simple, it has a lot of weirdness when you get to the higher levels. It's... You know what? No, I can't do that in good faith. Bard's A tier. It has... the more I think about it, the more I realize it's in that same boat as White Mage and Red Mage. Not exactly the easiest, most brain-dead thing to pick up, but it builds on itself very well. It starts in a very simple way. hit one button to deal damage. Oh, I get dots, make sure dots are up. Oh, I get songs, make sure songs are up. It gets a little janky at the higher levels with how you're supposed to do your songs rotations. It has a really weird state at level 50 where you only have 2 songs instead of 3, so you can't actually do full song rotations. But it's still pretty straightforward and simple. It's probably the Fizz range to recommend you start as the most, but like I've said, it doesn't have that warrior, paladin, summoner, baby's first job, and you can easily level it all the way type thing. I highly recommend it. If you want to start on Fizz range, you should probably do Bard. In fact, I will probably put Bard up here, above White Mage, in terms of jobs to start on. But I just can't in good conscience put it in S tier because it does have a little bit of extra ins and outs. It is definitely the best Fizz ranged to start as because of what I'm literally going to talk about now with Dancer B tier. It starts at level 60. You get so many skills. It's very important that you keep your stuff aligned because if you're drifting on Dancer, your party buffs are drifting, making it hard for the party. It is a proc-based job, but not in the same way that Bard is a proc-based job, and that you just get procs that you have to hit. Dancer likes to pool and burn in a burst window, and if you're not doing that, you're not as effective. It's very important that you also understand who to give dance partner to, because that can really help or hurt groups if you're giving dance partner to the wrong people, or if you're not giving it out at all, like I've seen some very confused dancers do. I'd probably leave Dancer exactly where it is on the tier list. Below, like, Dark Knight and Scholar in terms of jobs to pick up in order. I don't think it's an insanely difficult job, but I do think it has more optimization and know-how than Bard does, especially because of just having to choose a dance partner alone. That's something that, if you don't understand the game, you're probably not going to be choosing good dance partners, even if you're going by the classic tier list they give out and, like, the balance. It's fine. You know, like I said, it's kind of like Dark Knight and Scholar. It's fine. But I don't recommend it. Alright, there might be a bit of a weird hitch in the recording there, but I had to pause and go take care of something. And I'm too lazy to edit videos together right now, because I'm recording like 2 videos a day and editing another video each day. Listen, the content's gotta flow, right? But we were talking about Fizz ranged. Machinist is next. Haha, D tier. Job. It's not unintuitive. But Hypercharge is just a really big skill check in terms of can you mash the button and do your weaves the way you're supposed to. It's not super intuitive. The opener and rotation at 90 is definitely not intuitive. It's just got a lot of problems as a job. I could probably push it up to C tier, but like just with how much trouble it is to play on ping, I cannot, in good faith, put it above D tier. Like it'll barely be above Black Mage in terms of jobs to start as, but it's just got a lot of issues that make it really hard for me to recommend it over Bard or Dancer. Plus, it's a job that lives and dies by its personal DPS. With Bard and Dancer, you can at least still be applying party buffs, even if you're still working out your rotation and learning. Alright, melees. Dragoon. S tier. I'm not... Okay, I am biased. I can't not admit it, but Dragoon... Honestly, like... Dragoon is the #1 job I recommend any new player in the game start as. It has a very straightforward rotation that evolves over time and is pretty intuitive. It really just adds to what you have to do as time goes on. It has the classic thing of, oh, the buttons light up. I should hit the light up button. And while it does have the slight problem of you need to realize that there are 2 rotations you go through, your buffing and damage over time rotation versus your pure damage rotation, if you just think about it for a minute, you'll realize, oh, I should apply that damage over time and then do the other one that does more damage, right? Like, logically speaking, that is how it works. Jumps have been made much less animation locked, so I can recommend the job even more now. It's a job that really grows into itself as time goes on, just adding and adding and adding. It's not very difficult to get a handle on it at highest levels, though at level 90 and under optimization, obviously it gets a little crazy. But in terms of just a job to start out as, it's a DPS, it's a melee DPS, so you get as much free movement as you want. It's very cool in lots of ways. I know I'm biased about this, but like I just highly recommend Dragoon as the first job you start as. Just pick it. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. Alright. Monk. Monk's a hard one to place, because while I understand the ins and outs of the job, I understand as well that not a lot of people think Monk is easy. So I think I'm going to go with more of what I know from all the people I know that play the game, and put Monk as a solid B tier. It's in the same boat as, you know, Dancer, Scholar, Dark Knight. It's not particularly crazy hard to do, but it does require a little bit of know-how, and you probably should pick it up as like your second DPS in a particular job, right? That's just my opinion. Reaper. Honestly, C tier. It's not very intuitive. The job doesn't really come together until max level. It's a lot of gauge management. I think it's a great melee. I think that if it's like your second or third, you'll probably be fine. But like I said, I'm going to put it kind of around... It's not quite in the same tier as Monk, where it's like, well, if you pick this up as your second melee, you'll probably be fine. It should probably be like, you have a better handle on the game, you understand the ins and outs, you get how to take care of a lot of stuff in terms of your own rotations and gauges. So it's just going to be at a solid C tier. Not a bad job by any means, but I just can't rank it much higher. Samurai. Oddly enough, I'm going to put it in A tier, but it's going to be at the bottom of A tier. Very much at the bottom of A tier. I think it's fairly intuitive. Gain stickers, cast big damage. It does have a lot of optimization to do. They definitely dumbed down the job quite a bit, though, with the removal of Hisatsu Kaiten. So, for that alone, I can kind of rank it higher than I used to. You don't really need to be remembering to Kaiten. It has somewhat simple stuff in terms of, well, you just apply Higanbana, and then you use Midares until you have to reapply Higanbana. It's probably a bit more intuitive than Monk. So I'd probably recommend in terms of like, you know, if you've played other jobs and you want to pick up a first melee but don't want to start at level 1, Samurai is probably okay. I say it's in kind of a weird spot though. I because of the way that it feels at level 90 and the ways that it just got changed, it's a little weird. But I can still pretty wholeheartedly recommend it. The same way that I can recommend Red Mage. Ninja. I don't know what to put Ninja, I'm not gonna lie. This is one of those jobs that really messes with me in terms of like, when should people grab this job? Because it has the Dancer problem of you should really align your buffs properly. It has the Reaper problem of you need to know your management of your gauges. It's not quite as unintuitive as Black Mage, sorry. Stuttered my words and almost said Summoner. Ninja's a weird one, because it requires a lot of learning of mudras and getting those into pure muscle memory state. Its rotation and stuff changes a lot on the way to 70, but once 70 hits, you just add buttons to 90. I feel like, as much as I'd like to put it right up there next to Monk, I should probably put it down here next to Reaper instead. I don't think it's a bad job to start as, personally. But I also realize that comparing it to the other jobs on this list, it has a lot more know-how required. Realizing how you're supposed to use mudras can be a bit confusing. Knowing which mudras to use when requires a lot of reading. Figuring out how mudras works almost requires a guide. So as much as I'd like to put it higher, I realize that it should probably be in the C tier down here with Sage and Reaper, where like second or third job in the game, it's probably fine. But you should really have a handle on how the game functions before you pick these things up. And yeah, this is how I would recommend jobs, like just about legitimately in order. Dragoon, number 1 hands down. Warrior, easy number 2. Paladin, soon after. Summoner, Bard, White Mage, Red Mage, Samurai. Dark Knight, Scholar, Dancer, Monk, Sage, Ninja, Reaper, Gunbreaker, Astro, Machinist, Black Mage. This is really how I would recommend new players look into jobs in the game, and which order. In terms of, quite literally, left to right, top to bottom. Jobs I recommend the most new players start as, jobs I recommend the least players start as. This isn't saying that if you don't think you can handle it, sorry, let me phrase that exactly how I want to. If you think you can handle learning a more complex job, don't let me in this tier list stop you. However, I personally recommend you start with something in either S or A tier as your first job in this game. That'll be it. Apologies for the extra long video, but I just really wanted to give my explanations, and this list requires a lot of thinking, and some decisions changed in the moment the second I placed them on the tier list. So if you like it, leave a like. If you don't like it, leave a dislike. Subscribe if you want to see more. Comment if you disagree. If you want to see me play these games live, I'm on Twitch most nights, 7 p.m. Eastern on average. Maybe a little earlier depending on the day. Thanks for watching and hanging out, and I hope to catch you in the next one.